In this video, I'm going to show you how to mould polyurethane rubber grips for your sim racing wheel projects. Here's a few examples of ones I've made before. The moulds I used are available to download from my printables page. This is the Formula 3 Super Formula Lights steering wheel that we've designed and built and is available on printables. It's got 6 buttons on the front, 2 paddle shifters on the back, a screen and 12 rev lights. And it currently has 3D printed grips, which there's nothing wrong with, but they're not particularly comfortable. So what we want to do is cast some polyurethane rubber grips onto this, as I have done with other wheels in the past. So this is the Turn Racing Ferrari Challenge 488 wheel that I made a few months ago, and I designed some moulds for this which I FDM printed and cast with a 60 show rating polyurethane rubber, and I'm going to go through how I did that but for the Formula 3 Super Formula Lights wheel. I printed the moulds with PLA Plus with 4 walls and 15% infill. If we put the 2 halves of the moulds together, you see that there's 2 holes at the top in the centre. So there's the large hole, which is where we'll inject the rubber, and the smaller one, which allows the air to escape as we fill it up. In the rear one, you'll also see a channel which does a similar job. It allows the rubber to fill up right to the top of this part here. If we didn't have that there, you'd get an air bubble there and probably no rubber in that part of the grip. So another part you'll have to print off is this, which is the moulding stand. So this is going to hold our plate while we attach our moulds and inject the rubber into them. So the plate will go into it upside down, and we'll attach it with some bolts later on. And then when we put our moulds onto it, as you can see, the bottom part of the grip, which is the top of the moulds, faces upwards, and that allows us to inject our rubber into here. But before we do that, we've got a bit of preparation on the moulds so we can get them ready to put the rubber into them. So the first thing we need to do is we need to sand the moulds so that we can fill them and get rid of these layer lines. And what we're going to use for this is this 3M medium sandpaper, which is foam backed, and it's about 120 grit. And we need to sand the cavities of the moulds and also the top surfaces as well. I'm using a 1-to-1 mix of cornflour and water washable resin to fill the layer lines in the moulds. Leave the moulds on a windowsill to cure. Repeat the process for a second and third coat of the resin and cornflour mix. So these are our moulds that we've painted with the resin, and cornflour mix, so they're looking quite rough at the moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to wet sand them, firstly with the medium grade again, and then with the fine grade, so we can get them nice and smooth. And for the top surfaces, I want to do that with some 800 sandpaper. We'll wet sand those flat so that they meet when we put them onto the plate. Wash the moulds and allow them to dry before continuing. The moulds have now dried, so we're ready for the next stage, which is applying the primer to them. What we're going to use is this U-Paul High Build primer, and we're going to do about 3 coats of this so that we can fill in all the imperfections in the moulds. We'll then sand that down and then we'll be ready to actually cast our rubber. You'll need 3 coats of primer to generate enough material to sand into. Allow them to dry fully before continuing. You can now wet sand the primer with ultrafine and microfine sanding sponges. Sand the top surfaces with 1000 grit sandpaper. Wash the moulds again and allow them to dry fully. The first thing we want to do is mount the plate into the moulding stand upside down and with the countersunks facing towards us. We'll then put the bolts in, which are M5 bolts, with their heads on the countersunk side so we know which is the front. The equipment we're going to need to do the moulding is a 2mm syringe for the dye, a 300ml syringe to put in the mixed up rubber, a couple of silicone spatulas to transfer it and mix it, a whole load of spring clamps so we can attach the moulds, 2 measuring jugs marked A and B, which we'll put the 2 parts of the rubber into, glue sticks and a hot glue gun, and finally some silicone release spray. So the rubber that we're going to use is part of this kit from MB Fiberglass, which is Polytech PT Flex 60 polyurethane casting rubber. It has a part A, which is the clear one, a part B, which is the brown coloured one, and we've also got the black pigment dye for this as well. And we need a set of scales so that we can weigh out the correct amount for our moulds. There are other casting rubbers available some of them with a much longer pot life. Cover your work area with cling film to make it easier to clean up at the end of the casting. Coat the moulds with a silicone mould release. We've now applied the mould release to the moulds, so now we want to attach them to the plate. Remembering that the bolt heads are the front of the plate, so we want our front mould on the front of there. Remember, these are marked up as the driver would see them, not how we would see them while moulding. You just want to check the alignment of the moulds. There will be some wiggle room with these, so you need to make sure that they're lined up so that our moulds are correct. We now want to check round and see if there's anywhere where we need some more support with the clamp. Once we're happy with that, we can then take the hot glue gun and seal around the edges of the mould. So I'm doing my moulds one at a time. I'm going to put a couple of clamps just on the other side to counterbalance it, so as we fill it up with rubber, it doesn't tip over, hopefully. Draw 1 ml of dye into the small syringe. Weigh out 90 grams of Part A. Followed by the same amount of Part B. You can now mix together the dye and Part B. We are now almost ready to mix Part A and B together. Get all of the equipment ready before mixing them. This product only has a pot life of 4 minutes. Start by adding Part A to Part B. Steadily mix them together for around 40 seconds, making sure that you scrape the edges and the bottom of the container. Draw the mixed rubber into the syringe. Steadily inject the rubber into the top of the mould. You can now leave the rubber to cure overnight. The next thing we need to do is remove our moulds. So we need something like a part splitter to remove the glue that we put around the edges, a rubber mallet, some demoulding wedges which are just 3D printed, some car trim removal tools so we can get a bit of leverage on the moulds, and some side cutters so that we can cut off any excess rubber. Carefully hammer the demoulding wedges into the edges of the mould. We've now demoulded our grip, so we want to cut off all this excess rubber that is around it. And to trim that off, we're just going to use some side cutters and a scalpel with a fresh blade in it. So I've now taken the plate off the moulding stand. As you can see, we've just got a bit of primer stuck to the grips. That'll come off just with soap and hot water and using a sponge with a scouring pad on it. So for comparison, I've put the 3D printed grip on the other side, just to compare them. Obviously our cast one is significantly smoother. It feels a lot more comfortable to hold, certainly for single-seater cars where you're crashing over curbs and using a lot of force through the wheel. I wouldn't say this is the last word in smoothness, but it is obviously significantly smoother than the 3D printed one. If you did want to get the cast one smoother, the unfortunate answer is to just do more sanding, essentially. You might have to do several rounds, or you could print it at a high resolution, then you'd have a bit less sanding. You could also get an SLA printed mould done as well. Again, that would be much smoother to start with, so you'd be able to get it to a much smoother state through sanding and preparing the mould that way. So these are the moulds after we've demoulded them from the grips. As you can see, I've not washed them or anything. But you'll notice that a lot of the primer has been pulled off on the flat surfaces and a little bit inside the moulds. So if you did want to reuse these, which you can do, just have to sand it down again with the fine, and then prime it, and then sand the primer back to the same level of smoothness that we did before. I've now repeated the process for the other side, so we've got both grips done. So the last thing to do is reassemble it and put it back onto the rest of the wheel. hope this tutorial helps you create moulded grips for your sim racing projects.